Real Estate and Transportation meeting. Commissioner Music.
Good morning. We have, looks like one item in front of us today. The purpose of this meeting is just proposed sale of 802 East Robson Street to the Polk County for future Polk EMS station.
Yeah, I'll describe that briefly. 802 East Robson Street is actually a huge piece of property, so we're just selling a very small portion of that. It's a 2.82 acre parcel. It's up on the screen there. You might recognize that. Just to the left of the screen is the Florida Highway Patrol Station, and the area outlined in orange is the old driving course that you used to do three-point turns on when you were trying to get your driver's license. That's the property that is under consideration for sale to the county for a potential EMS station in that area. They're trying to address an increase in calls in that area by siting a station up there. So they have offered to purchase this property for an appraised purchase price of $150,000. They had an appraisal done that was conducted in September of 2021. Under the proposed contract, they would close within 90 days after doing due diligence on the property. The county would be responsible for the cost of title insurance, recording fees, and dock stamps. And what the city will need to take care of is a lease on this property. There is a long-standing lease. We entered into a lease with the state back in 1971 for 50 years. All those different buildings that you see on the left of the screen are state buildings. You've got the Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles and the Florida Highway Patrol. But their lease encumbers a larger area than just where those buildings are. They don't actually need that area anymore, so they're willing to cooperate with us and release the property that we want to sell to the county from their lease. Right now, their lease goes through July of 2024 with 2 one-year possible extensions. They have asked that in exchange for them releasing this property from their lease, that we extend the lease that they have until July of 2029 with 2 one-year extensions that would be exercisable upon mutual consent of the parties. I mean, they've got a very large investment in the buildings there. They built those buildings back in the 70s. And they don't have any interest in moving, so I don't think we have any objection to extending the release to 2029 in exchange for them releasing the property that we need to sell to the county. Wade Allen with the county is here. He's their chief right-of-way agent. We have dealt with Wade forever on all sorts of issues. He's sort of the Greg James of the county. If any road project that you've seen the county do, he's been a key component of getting the right-of-way for those projects. So anyway.
Thank you. And since then, actually, we've changed titles, and it's the Real Estate Service Administrator, and that and 89 cents will get me a medium big gulp down at 7-Eleven. But I do want to introduce Rob Weech. Rob's the fire chief for Polk County, and so if we have any questions in regards to that, but you know, this particular facility, it's my understanding that the larger service call, about 80% of the calls coming out of this vicinity up here are obviously municipal, your citizens and our citizens, but you know, they're city folks. And from that standpoint, we're really appreciative. Our board is really appreciative. The county manager, we've talked to them. Obviously, if you all will approve this and be gracious to do that, we would then take it back to our board and we'll have them approve it. But I don't see any issues with that. We've discussed with Palmer and Jason. They've been wonderful to work with, and it's taken a while. I believe I started this process when COVID just kicked in, and so there was some delay there, but we are very appreciative because we've got it funded. Matter of fact, based on your all's approval, we'll probably go ahead and start kicking off our design for this particular facility. We are anticipating that, I don't know the exact square footage, it's probably going to be between a 4,000 and 6,000 square foot building. We are anticipating that the bays will have to come in off of the main road there, off Robinson. But other than that, we are super excited to get this site and help out everybody, pardon the expression. This is one of those situations where it's truly a win-win because we need to service your citizens, and this is a great location.
Yeah. So. Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
Thank you. What's the timeline for construction? When do you hope to have the facility open?
I've got to be realistic. Everything is taking longer supply demand, if I think of that from that standpoint. So I'm going to look at it from a regular station standpoint. We don't have the environmental issues and all those types of constraints that we have on some of our other station sites. So I'm thinking we're probably looking at about a one-year time period for design, and then we would look to go straight into construction. Literally, if we could construct next week, we would, but we've got to go through that design phase.
Excellent, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I know I'm not on your committee, but I just want to make a comment with what I've seen in the North Lakeland area, especially with the two new fire stations that you erected and have been open in the last year or so. I think it's a win-win for what's happening. And we know the growth of North Lakeland continues to grow, and I know what we're looking at possibly doing even ourselves. We're own another fire station for our city boundary, and I know with EMS going right there is needed.
Yeah, really, it's a question of can we serve the citizens from a reasonable perspective.
Yes.
and response times and stuff. We don't have any more infrastructure within what we have in that area now to add rescue trucks, and we do know we're going to continue to grow, and the continued service, increased service is something that we're going to need over time. So this addresses a big need for us. We're the busiest in Lakeland, and that's without doubt, and I don't see that slowing down any. So it really comes down to how can we serve the citizens, and what's the best way to do that. And the only way to do that as we look forward is to do it with more. We just have no space to add more. We need the space to add more.
Laura, when we look at this drawing that's on the board, what is the grassy or the treed property to the south? Is that part of our?
That's part of what we're leasing to the state.
Okay.
And, in conjunction with this, again, we're going to go to the state and have them release not only the area that's outlined in orange, but they're going to release that area as well and some area behind that.
So if we look at that section there in between those, and they release that center parcel as well. So we've got the Polk County Health site on the south, and then we'll have the fire station on the north. What does that do with that existing pond in that other area? Are we a little snookered there?
Are you talking the area to the far east there, the existing pond?
Correct. And then between the existing pond and that treed area, I mean, is that a buildable parcel?
I don't think so. I think it's wet, and it's also,
Yeah.
I think that the state is using that for required stormwater.
Okay. So the fact that we're going to have buildings on both sides don't really affect that parcel because it's a non-buildable spot.
Right.
Okay. That was my question. Okay. Any other questions? Okay.
Motion approved.
Thank you. All in favor?
I got a second.
Oh, and do we have a second? I guess I have to second it, or how does that work?
Reed's not here, he's the other committee member.
Right, that's what I was asking. So how does that work?
There's only two of the three.
Commissioner McLeod and you to.
Oh, okay, so he will, then I'll second it, and, okay, all in favor?
You did.
Aye. The motion passes, thank you. We've not had it without Reed, so I wasn't sure, so thank you. And we'd still be talking if Reed was here.
Are you done?
I am done, thank you. I'm sorry, Chair.
Okay. So that meeting's adjourned, and we will hold until 8:30 for our agenda study for City Commission.
So don't miss a meeting or
Quickly
get
while you're here,
Exactly, be careful.
thanks, appreciate it.
Thank y'all.
We have a utility committee meeting at 11. I think we do have some utility people here and we have typically not taken up those utility items when we have a utility committee meeting. So if that is the intention, we'd like to go ahead and let those guys leave rather than sit around to the end of the study.
Is that okay?
Just cover it utility.
Yeah, just do it at utility.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I usually forget to say that, but those guys sit around and they're mad at me. So.
Remember, you don't want to hang out with us? Beautification Awards, we have proclamations, Juneteenth, National Garden Week, and vitiligo awareness. I had to do that last year, so.
Vitiligo.
When I saw it, I was like, oh, he'll be back by Monday. We'll do our committee reports, related items, and then we are gonna look at our approval of consent agenda. So those are the minutes. And if you wanna look at that really quick, see what else is asterisked. And then we have two things from the finance director and one from utility. They're asterisked. Do you want to go through those now, Mike, or do you want to wait?
No, I can do it.
Okay.
Good morning. The first item is something that we bring to the commission every 6 months. Throughout the year, we receive reimbursements for various expenses that we bill out. One of the most common and more recurring of the larger dollar amounts is the off-duty overtime charged out by our officers at LPD to various community organizations. And so this is simply authorizing us to post the revenues associated with those receipts coming in.
Questions for Mike on this comprehensive list? Mr. Music?
Yeah, I wasn't going to review the comprehensive list, but you budget that just based on historical of these expenses over time. How do you
These aren't
budget
budgeted.
that?
These aren't budgeted. These are.
No, but in our overall yearly budget, I mean, this money is somehow set aside for potentially. No, that's why we're going.
These are monies that, for example, at LPD, they have an idea of what they're going to be asked to provide to a church or a bank of folks that are off duty. Okay, and so we have an idea what that's going to be from a staffing level, but we don't budget for that.
Okay.
We'll expend it, and then we'll get reimbursed. But what we do is we actually post those revenues back in, and then we formally every 6 months are allowed to come in and simply adopt it, show it and adopt it, and post it. Yeah, so these are not budgeted items. Otherwise, they would simply be deposited, and otherwise, because we'd kill you every commission meeting if we brought in every revenue that we had budgeted.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay, good.
Other questions for Mr. Brosart? Okay, we'll go to the next one then.
The next item was as expected as we all buy our gasoline and our diesel. We had anticipated seeing an appropriation at some point this year associated with the fuel. We had hoped that it would go down, the cost would go down at some point, levelized. They've stayed up. And so what we are doing is asking for slightly less than $1.5 million in appropriation for fuel. What's unique about this is we had recognized vacancies in our facilities maintenance group, primarily early into the budget cycle. Richard's been able to fill a lot of them. But because of that, we don't need to bill out the last few months of the year for those charges to the other departments, because it would have been extra money that would have fallen to the bottom line of facilities. Normally, we'd let that fall to the bottom line, and we would just lower the rates next year. That's what happened. We'd try not to make a profit in internal service funds like that. So with this, what we've been able to do is say, okay, Sean, here's the part you're allowed to, or authorized to deappropriate and transfer between facilities. In other words, in police and in fire, those types of areas, we know that their costs were going to go up, but we knew that the costs for facilities are going to go down by a commensurate amount, okay? So Sean's able to do that. He's not allowed to appropriate the new monies because solid waste didn't have enough savings from facilities to cover that. So this is an appropriation request to increase the budget for fuel that Gary's going to buy, and then increase Gene Ginn's expenditures for gasoline and diesel, primarily diesel. And everybody else, we're just transferring the budget over. So what that meant, for example, what we're going to save in the general fund is actually about $193,000 because our fuel costs are going up, but our savings from facilities not being billed out the last 3 months for all of our general fund buildings. We're actually going to save a little less than $200,000 in that. So that's the net of it. Like I said, normally we wouldn't do that because it would just fall to the bottom line each year. So.
Yeah, Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Mike, do we or staff feel like the $1.4 million will be sufficient for the remainder of the fiscal year for the fuel budget?
Gary vetted that pretty hard. Oh, well, there he is right here. I don't want to speak for you. Go ahead, buddy.
Well, I mean, I filled up this morning, unfortunately. I have to buy premium, so it was $5.40 a gallon. That was stunning to me, so I'm optimistic that we might not have to ask for another appropriation, but really, there's no telling. It's so bad right now.
We asked him to project based on what he's seen as his highest cost to us for gasoline and diesel for the remainder of the year, knowing that, he understands what the normal cycles are for driving, solid waste vehicles and those types of things. So he has a good idea on the usage side. A little harder to project on the fuel side. He's always been pretty good at it. Rarely do we have to come with these. Usually it's a savings and it just gets rolled back into everybody's budgets at the end of the year. So we're hopeful that's the case. I think for fire it was like $50,000 extra. They had budgeted enough. We had seen some of that. So hopeful. But we will raise a flag as soon as we see something materially change.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Music and then Commissioner Walker.
Thank you. What is our yearly fuel budget?
Normally, it's about $3.2 million.
So that's a pretty significant.
Yeah, this is a huge increase. Unprecedented for sure.
Because we're adding one.
Yeah, it's $2 a gallon difference than it was over a year ago.
I think so.
Oh, yeah. So.
Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Dear, as far as the vehicles themselves, I know you've always ran a very efficient department, all the awards we get on a national basis for your department and all. But our facilities, our equipment, the trucks that we're running for the use, we find them still being, I say okay, for lack of a better word, they still run fine, they're still efficient. Thank you, ma'am.
We normally spec the smallest engine we can use and still keep the vehicle useful for its missions. And we're down to pickup truck engines are under 3 liters now. That's really small, and they do just fine. And we retune them to reduce idles and stuff like that. So we get passive fuel cost avoidance doing that kind of thing. And yeah, we see them. We touch every vehicle at least once a year. A lot of them, a lot more than once a year. So we're continually putting diagnostics on them and making sure they're running properly and doing the best we can. The only thing we try to steer our customers away from are cheaper fuel stations, because some of those don't have as high of a quality tier of fuel, but that's about the only other improvement we can make unless we just were able to get $2 bazillion and electrify the whole fleet. So
$2 bazillion is what we're,
That's what we're aiming for.
that's what we're looking for.
Quick savings, right?
Yeah. Any other questions for Gary? Good morning.
Howdy. I'm sorry
You're good.
late.
Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate that.
Yep.
All right, Mike.
That's it.
you good?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So those two, everybody good with?
Yeah.
And then we have Ramona. There's another consent item. Do you want to talk about that at utility or
whatever you prefer?
what's the will of the commission?
The utility got to hear it, so.
Yeah, we'll wait until utility. So that's 3. Everybody's good with those 3 being on
Yeah.
consent?
Yes.
Also, while we're on utility, we had an offline discussion about when we have utility items on a utility day, will the commission be to keep those, not necessitate staff being here and just doing that at the utility committee meeting later that morning?
I think so, yeah.
Do we need a thumbs up on that?
Sure.
Fine with me.
Yeah, everybody who's okay with that, thumbs up, so Kelly can write it down. Okay, back to the beginning of the agenda. So the next item, we will have the request from the general public, item 1, and then item 2, equalization hearing. You all want to go through that?
Equalization should just be same stuff you see every few weeks, pretty routine.
Item number 3, our public hearing, the second reading, something we haven't heard about before.
Right, okay.
Palmer.
Yeah, all right, so, again, our objective today would be to avoid discussing the merits of the case, but to give you guys as much background information as you need to be prepared to make a decision on Monday. So any questions about the facts of the application or the legal standard that needs to be applied, be happy to address this morning. A couple of procedural notes on this. One, last time we heard this, we moved that item to the end of the agenda and took care of the other business so that those people could leave. I don't know if that is the desire of the commission again to go ahead and move this down to the bottom of the agenda.
It makes sense.
Is that a decision that's up to us?
Yes.
Okay, so
Do we want to move it up or down?
We want it to be the last thing we talk about so that
the other items will probably move a lot quicker, so then we could probably devote time to this if we push it at the end and not feel compelled to race through. We want to hear from everybody. We want to have a fluid discussion. I don't think we want to feel like there's a time constraint, right?
Well, and then it also just that you don't have staff sitting around for a couple hours when they can be out getting something done.
Okay.
I would agree.
So we're saying leaving it here as it is, or moving it down?
Moving it later.
So we have more time to digest.
Yes.
Well, we don't have anything after that we've
There's
got to
nothing
press and
that-
run, and
It'll be the last thing
Item.
on the item.
it's the most.
Well, I'm of the opinion I don't want to keep people waiting either. I don't want to keep people who are coming,
Right.
who we know will come and want to hear, have them to wait till we get through all of our items to get to them to voice their opinions and talk.
Well, I think
I'm here to help and work, I just busy work.
if we decide to do it now, it's better than deciding Monday when people are already there and pushing it to the end because we want to get through the rest of the agenda. You know what I'm saying? Like if we could be on the front end of it, telling the public to be on the expectation that it's going to be the last item on the agenda, that gives them a little more so they're not sitting and having to
I
wait.
think if you think it's going to be an opportune time to be able to let them know in time to do it now, I have a problem with that. Because I do not want them waiting. I don't want anybody waiting. Hey, I've been here 2 hours and we still haven't gotten this thing. So.
The only thing I would say to that is that just looking through the agenda, those items should move very quickly.
Yeah.
All those ordinances are first reading, so title only, and I don't see anything else that should be too controversial.
Other comments or questions or opinions?
I don't have anything about that. I'd like to ask some questions of
Okay.
Teresa.
Let's talk about this first and then decide where we're going to put it on the agenda, and then we'll go into the presentation and Teresa can to share with us.
I'd like to move that we move it to the end of the agenda, but
That's good. I'll second that.
All right, all in favor of moving it later in the agenda?
Discussion?
Discussion, yes.
As long as we know, if we get Kevin to notify people.
We do it right now.
If we can notify the public, I agree with that.
That's only I agree with it.
Quite frankly, I don't know it's going to change a whole lot
Probably-
when it's heard. I mean, maybe 10, 15 minutes later.
I concur.
Right, that's
Yeah, I
fine.
think the rest of the agenda will go really
Yeah, that's
quickly.
fine.
I hope.
Okay, well, we'll know at the end of this meeting when we go through the rest of the agenda. We'll see how quick it is. All in favor of moving it later in the agenda?
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, there
Not
you
so
go.
much.
Directive to staff to do that. Okay. Commissioner Reed?
Thank you. And a lot of it's for redundancy that I know, but can you give me the mix?
Sure. Find them.
So it is 12 studios, 88 one-bedrooms, 81 two-bedrooms, and 30 three-bedroom units.
So it's 1830, 132?
It is 211. 211 is the new total.
Okay, so it's 162, and so 61 bedrooms, right?
It is 100, so 88. Technically, the studios and the one-bedrooms are...
Oh, so it's on the left, okay, I'm
Yeah,
reading the
numbers on
numbers
the left
around
and
here.
the
I'm reading
parking is on
I'm
the
sorry,
right.
I'm sorry, I'm parking spaces.
You're writing down the parking spaces.
Yes, I was writing down parking spaces, trying to figure that. My math's not very good today compared to what you're saying. Are we subsidizing any, is there getting any parking credits now for the mass transit and stuff too?
There is a parking offset, so as you can see from this table, the total required under the Land Development Code is 390 units, with a 20% reduction for transit and bicycle facilities. That is brought down to 312, and they are providing 368 spaces.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions for Teresa? Or Teresa, is there anything else you want to walk through?
No, because this is essentially the same presentation that was made at the meeting on the 16th. On the first reading, could run through it. The only thing to add is that since that time, we've continued discussions with Polk County and with the school district, looking at different ways to address operational issues with the school. We had asked about changing the dismissal times for middle school, and they said that's not a possibility, but we are continuing to pursue the turn lane improvements on Lake Miriam Drive, separate from this zoning action. So we continue to have those discussions. The only additional piece of information that the applicant provided since the May 16th meeting was a letter from their environmental consultant, basically reaffirming a prior environmental assessment that had been done, saying that back in 2020, reaffirming those findings, and then they had some correspondence from U.S. Fish and Wildlife saying that they were exempt from having to do a more formal analysis for sand skinks, which are a protected species, just given the nature of the site, that it's really not something where they would expect to find that on the site. So they've just provided additional documentation to back up the environmental concerns that had been addressed.
Mine's more of a legal question, so I don't know if anyone else has questions for Teresa before we move to that. Well, I guess I do have one question for Teresa. Teresa, I know a lot of people have been talking about, I guess initially there was a setback that Publix made to keep things in line, contextually with the neighborhood, and then now this is a smaller setback. Can you remind me when that was changed or when that setback?
Yes, my recollection is that that was done back in 2002 when there was a modification to the PUD to add additional retail entitlements into the overall development, and particularly in that what was called Phase 2, fronting Lake Miriam Drive. So that reduction in the setback was done at that time.
2002?
Yes, and then when the LA Fitness came in, I believe that was further reduced at that time. That was the reason for them having an enhanced buffer, so doing some additional landscape treatments within that area.
And both times when those modifications were made, did those go through like a planning and zoning and a public hearing?
Yes, they went through planning and zoning and city commission for approval.
Okay, I think the setback was the main question. And then you went over the modification for this application. So I guess my other question, other than saving comments for Monday, is a legal question. Typically, when we receive information, from attorneys, we'll have opportunity to talk to our city attorney to get, consult with, to see how you feel like we're faring on this particular issue, potential litigation, And so this will go straight to a public hearing. And so I didn't know if we wanted to have any kind of questioning about that prior to our public hearing. I know that, I'll use the example, because it's not Monday's example, on the cell phone tower. So we have a city attorney, and he'll say, it's the FCC who is the direct, they provide the oversight for RF. And so we are not, that is not our purview. We cannot say whether or not we think that RF is dangerous, to citizens, and then use that as rationale as to deny a cell phone tower.
Radio frequency.
Radio frequency. So, and we've had some where it's not been aesthetics, and it's not been the setbacks, and it's not been whether or not that site is conducive to a good cell tower. More, it seems to me, as one of 7, that the neighbors were mostly concerned about the radio frequency giving them cancer, or, them being fearful of that. And so it's difficult. We're in the quasi-judicial role, and we have to use, evidence that can be supported in, if they're pursued later by the cell, company. We can't say, well, all these, folks were really afraid, for their lives and their health, because then that would not fit within the parameters of our decision-making, that we would have under a court of law. And, I do take very seriously that we do live in Florida, and we've had the Burt-Harris law, that when you take away a landowner's right, to make money on that property that they thought they could make when they bought that property, that is, a serious offense, and that you have to balance, a developer's right to develop and the neighbor's right to still enjoy the quality of life that they have within their neighborhood. So knowing that Burt-Harris law at the state level, knowing that the state took away the opportunity to use a failing road and some of these things because it was during a time in which we were trying to incentivize development. Now we're entering a time, maybe it's short-lived, maybe it's just COVID, everyone wants to come to Florida, and then next year that will, they'll push pause and it'll stop. In the meantime, we're given a certain set of parameters legally, how we can make our decisions. And I think it's important because I think, and I try to use these agenda studies as if people are really watching and listening, but I don't know if they are. Because it can come across to the general public that we are just going to make our decision based on if we like this person, or we think we like apartments, or we don't like apartments, or we like commercial, or that we it's our best friend in the audience, or we support developers and we're all for some kind of money in our pockets. But this case, and I love that our city attorney reinforces the fact that when it's gone through staff, and staff's looked at our land code and our comprehensive plan, and it's gone through a P&Z, and it comes to us, and it's a land, code change, or a zoning use change, that this quasi-judicial role, if we're sued, then we need to make sure that we made our decision something that'll...
On solid ground.
Right, stand up in a court of law, not just on what we would do in our own world. And so, I was hopeful that, we wouldn't have the continuance at the last meeting, and I was hopeful that the reason that we have a public hearing is because, there are nuances that neighbors know that is not directly in the land code. It is not spelled out in black and white on a piece of paper. The reason that we're set up this way as voice of the people and have a public hearing when there's a lane, because there are single-family homes with a driveway that their only emergency exit from their neighborhood is on that little piece of road, which is county on one side, city on the other side, and a school that won't change their, won't make an adjustment, for those folks to have access if that congests more. There are, cul-de-sacs, that's their only emergency access. Those are unique nuances. There's a middle school there, and there's county on one side, city on. There's all these nuances that the neighbors know. Now, I know that it can be reflected as, this is just another case of NIMBY. No one likes anything in their backyard. But the reason we give out a 500-foot notification and we let HOAs know is because that is part of the process. We do believe in landowner rights and development rights, but we also believe in neighbors enjoying a quality of life that they've had. Now, we cannot assure them that they can maintain a rural quality of life if property all around them already has by right opportunity to build. It just hasn't been built on yet. I know I've heard you say, Commissioner Music, well, it's a grassy, it's just grassy, it's doing nothing. Well, if that's how it's zoned, maybe it's a conservation easement. We want it to be grass in perpetuity. then grass is more important than a development. Grass is more important than, impact fees or anything else. But this parcel is not designated as a, conservation easement. It's not a wildlife corridor. It's not a park. It has always been a commercial piece of land, and it has by right development for commercial property that will add traffic to an already failing road, and we cannot use a failing road as our objection, like we cannot use RF as an objection to a cell tower. So that, to me, puts me in a predicament on Monday, when I feel like we gave a continuance based on the height of the building, when that might be part of what people are upset about. I feel like the majority, and I'm one of 7, is the traffic, and that we've somehow, including the county and the school board and everyone in charge, has allowed this road to become a failing road. And now there's by right development afforded to the developer, and we have people who don't like the traffic there. And yet, what's allowed by right could be worse than what they're proposing. And it's not the developer's fault that this road is in the position that it's in, and they want to develop their land. So getting a legal letter over, the last week, from the side of the developer makes me think, and I don't have a crystal ball, that they are going to probably, if this doesn't pass, want legal action because they have a right to build, and they feel like they have shown all the reasons why they are within the law to request this zoning. And so, to me, that's a little different going into Monday, and I wanted to use this broad brush to paint this for us, and for the neighbors, that I want to know what my legal, as a city commissioner, I know what I'm doing when I'm elected by populace to represent their voice, and that's what I feel like I've been doing. But I also have another obligation under the law, like sunshine laws and other laws, that I also want to be cognizant of, prior to Monday's discussions.
So would it be helpful for you for Palmer to address that? Is that the question of?
I can certainly address some of that.
Okay. Is that good?
Okay, starting at the beginning, Bert Harris would not apply in this situation because that deals with taking away an existing right. They're seeking a new right. So the Bert Harris Act would not apply here. As far as the existing failure of the roads out there, the state law is clear that you can't make a developer pay to correct existing deficiencies. So you can't make them go spend a bunch of money to add what turn lanes and stuff like that. However, you can make a developer offset additional impacts on those failing roads. And certainly, if that can't be offset, that certainly can be, part of your consideration on whether to approve or not to approve. So, you can't make them pay for existing deficiencies, but on the other hand, state law doesn't allow them to make a situation worse. And I'm not saying whether they are making the situation worse or not. I'm just speaking in a vacuum here legally. So it's only existing deficiencies, not additional burdens on the transportation system that you're precluded from making them correct. Transportation could be a factor within those constraints. As far as competent substantial evidence, and you saw the letter from the attorney, and I generally agree that I think that she set forth the correct legal standards. The leading case is Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County versus Snyder. It's been the leading case forever in these zoning cases. And it puts the initial burden on the applicant to prove that their proposal is consistent with the comp plan. And once they meet that burden, then the burden shifts to the local government to show that there is competent substantial evidence to support that there's a legitimate public purpose in maintaining the existing zoning on the property. The existing zoning on the property is a commercial use, so that is your comparison. It's not the comparison's not between what they're proposing and an empty field. It's the existing zoning on the property. And we've discussed the issue of technical subjects like transportation, property valuation, that type of thing. And there's plenty of cases out there that say that to rely on those as grounds for a decision needs to be based on an expert's opinion. It can't be based on lay opinion. Those are technical subjects. So as far as compatibility, that is an issue that's much more susceptible to the testimony of the neighborhood. But it can't be just generalized statements that it's incompatible. You need to be able to point to specific reasons why it's not compatible. So I'm not sure if I hit all your topics there or not.
I think so. So the burden of proof switching to us to say why commercial or what's by right would be better than what's being proposed, I feel like is a little problematic, but I'm glad to know that's what it said in the letter, and it sort of seemed like they were hyper-focusing on that, and I wanted to know if that in fact is our burden to prove, or if there are other variables. It does sound like compatibility still does give a little bit of a...
It's more of a qualitative issue versus a technical subject.
Yes, Commissioner.
But still needs to be fact-based.
Yeah.
Palmer, what was the name of that case that you said is the leading case?
Yeah.
Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County versus Snyder, SNYDER.
It's in there. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it was in the
Okay,
letter.
I haven't had a chance to go through it. Okay, right.
So I have a question that's pertaining to the legal side too. So when we look at, are there any cases that look at the property rights of a developer? When we're talking about property rights, and Commissioner Madden was really eloquent in sort of laying this out, but when you're talking about the property rights of a developer, how do they circumvent the collective property rights of the neighbors?
Do the property rights of a developer override the property rights?
So if we're talking about they have right, so property, when she brought up, developers having, or, ownership with regard, I know Burt Harris doesn't apply to this, but it kind of goes down this path. So if you're talking about that the developer has certain rights to what they've purchased, well, I have two questions actually, but one has to wait till Monday. Does that always supersede the property rights of the neighborhood? Because when we talk about this, sometimes we say, the developer's rights, and then we just say the neighbors. But the neighbors own that land as well, so they don't have they only have rights to like their acre or their lot or whatever, so they can't infringe like their will on anybody else's property rights across the street. I know you don't.
Yeah, I think I know what you're saying, but I think it goes back to the legal standard again. And that is, if there is a substantial basis for maintaining the existing zoning on the property, for example, that it's shown with fact-based testimony and evidence that the proposed development is incompatible with the existing neighborhood, and that is a ground for denying an application.
Commissioner Musing.
You were saying, as far as traffic is concerned, that the additional burden that they have on the existing structure is something that we could require that they mitigate.
Correct.
How do we get that information to know what the additional burden will be?
And I know that's addressed in the staff report. There's discussion about how many seconds additional delays at intersections and what the level of service standard of the roads out there is now and what it will be after the development.
Okay, so if we have that, right, so we have that it's X number of whatever the quantitative data is, how do we take that and say, here's what an offsetting looks like?
Well, that's part of the analysis that is provided to us through their traffic analysis, is saying whether or not that increase necessitates some type of off-site mitigation. And I think in this instance, because of the location of the development, and when you apply, all of the transit policies that we have within the comp plan, I think that was seen as a way of kind of offsetting the increase and knowing what the land use designation is for the property, being within, transit-oriented corridor. So the conclusion was there weren't any off-site mitigation.
So how do we as a commission and as a city look at that through our own eyes and not through the data that they have given? Because obviously, from a citizen standpoint, they're going to what I have heard is, well, obviously they're going to say that. So how do we use our own traffic experts and data to be able to say, yes, we concur with that, or no, we think that these additional steps need to be taken?
Well, and that's the role of Chuck and others within the city that have reviewed the traffic study in saying that they agree with the findings. First of all, they established the methodology with the applicant, so that was the first step. And then second was reviewing the analysis and coming to the same conclusion as the study does, or saying, no, we don't agree. And so in this case, the staff didn't propose any additional roadway improvements that would be needed. In terms of just pure numbers and trip generation, but without Chuck here, and he can, speak to this on Monday, I don't know that precludes you from looking at operational issues and concerns beyond just congestion or number of trips, but how the roadway is actually operating and impacts with the school in combination with that. So I would think that would be fair to look at beyond just the pure technical, here are the numbers, we find that, no, this doesn't create any need for any additional off-site improvements, if that makes sense. Yes, Commissioner Walker.
I'm trying to make sure I keep my lips shut to not say something that should not be said on Monday. But you just said something, and picking back on what Commissioner Hughes just said. So we cannot deal with the fact that the additional burden that be placed on, as you just opened a question in my mind. Well, yes, based on facts or data that was presented, but still, is there additional burden factor there that could be still discussed or shared as it would come to us from not only my staff, what they're saying based on the facts was given to them, and the methodology used. But what we actually know what's happening.
The only thing state law precludes you from doing is holding the developer responsible for existing transportation deficiencies, not additional future deficiencies that their development will cause. And so I think that's where the analysis, if you want to go there on Monday, it needs to be. I mean, I think it's probably a discussion with your transportation staff as to what their conclusions are, how they got there. Does that truly offset the transportation impact or not? And your staff analysis is extremely important. They do a great job, but you're not bound by that. I know that in the first cell tower case, I believe there was actually a staff recommendation of approval, and the city commission decided to deny that. The cell tower developer appealed that to federal court, and we were able to show that there was substantial evidence in the record to support the denial, despite the fact that there was a staff recommendation of approval there. So your staff analysis and recommendation is very important. It shouldn't be taken lightly, but it's not the end of the discussion. So you do have the right to ask questions and analyze that and reach an independent conclusion. It just needs to be based on, have a rational basis if you decide to disagree with that.
Right. Yes.
Just, I think my question follows up on that. So if staff reviews, Chuck and his team reviews it, and they agree with the data that has been presented by the developer, but yet we are looking at, and to use the word anecdotal information based on the fact that we're going to have X number of people, which is going to generate X number of cars and trips, we can use that information even though it's not quantitative data. I mean, we can't use, going back to the towers, we can't use the RF data, right, or the fear of that. So when we're talking about a development like this, for me to sit and hear that, if we hear that we agree with their findings on traffic, but yet we have citizens come up and they're asking questions about, tell me how you can have 300 and whatever the number is, and that's not going to negatively affect me, right? Well, it hasn't happened yet. It's in the future. Or can we use that information for a legal defense in the future? Well, the reason we said no is because we know that X number of vehicles is going to cause more congestion.
it's a high bar, and I don't like the word anecdotal.
Okay, then I won't use that.
I think you need to, yeah. And again, lay testimony is not sufficient under court decisions.
And I guess really that's really what I guess I'm looking for right there.
I think
Okay.
you
That's the legal term.
need to be able to point to something specific in the record
Yes.
in the traffic analysis in order to use that as a basis.
Okay. Good. Yeah, that was the terminology I was looking for. Thank you.
Commissioner Madden?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So, pointing to specifics in the traffic analysis, so we'll probably need to make sure, Chuck, I feel like I asked questions before, but I was taking in all the different angles, whereas this, it's a little finer tuned because it's just a modification of the application. It's not the whole thing we're thinking about. When it comes to the traffic, I remember Chuck saying something about kind of it sounded like more of a suggestion than, to do an egress only out onto South Florida Avenue so that, and I don't know how you do that. Like, I don't know how you allow some people to go out onto Lake Merriam Road because they live on Lake Merriam Road, and then some, who live in the apartments not to be able to go out that way. Is there some kind of predictability in the traffic analysis that would show those apartment folks would not have a need to necessarily go that way because, only the ones that would have people in school or only the one, how do they show that kind of predictability in a traffic study of which way they would egress the shopping center?
Right, so they did not show or take into consideration, I believe, going through the shopping center and exiting out onto Florida Avenue because the study was done pre, the city staff reviewing it, and then making the recommendation that they provide the additional access point through the shopping center to allow people to get back out onto South Florida Avenue. So I think that was seen as what they submitted, what didn't cause a concern, but to kind of provide additional relief, it was suggested that they have that ability to go out onto South Florida Avenue.
So they felt even without that egress option
Correct.
or mandate, that the traffic was still suitable.
That's correct.
For the development.
This was just seen as an added
That was
benefit,
just a relief
allowing
valve
them
if in
to.
fact the anecdotal comes true that there's more traffic on it.
Right. To distribute it even more so than having it come out at that one point. So even with it not having that additional way to get out of the project, it was still acceptable.
I think my questions are answered.
Awesome. Commissioner Meade?
Thank you. Briefly, I think to answer one question that you had, and maybe I shouldn't go into it today, but invariably you're talking about quality of life for your surrounding neighborhood. If you have a property and somebody wants to put a landfill, they have to worry about smell, et cetera, parks and lights. And so there again, I think you do have to consider quality of life for your surrounding property owners. And of course, to answer your question, no two properties and locations are the same. So you have the right to consider all the different parameters about that particular property and how it relates to the intersections and the surrounding uses for your consideration. And there again, similar when they did the Grove Park Shopping Center, they redid all the parking, and it's a cluster, in my opinion, from what it was. And who knows what they may do at the remodeling of the new shopping center with parking and stuff like that. So maybe that would shed a little bit of light from my perspective. But that's briefly it. And if Chuck's going to be there, Dan, if he's going to say he agrees with it, because it comes from a manual. This is what they say. It's like I pull these numbers out of a book on specific locations, but you have to try to apply these numbers to trying to put a round hole in a square box type thing. And so if he does, I want him to thoroughly make an analysis of why he does it in relationship to what the book says type stuff. And then kind of show proof of it, I guess, which is going to be difficult from that standpoint. But that's...
You got one question? from a legal standpoint, when you, to use one of his terms, quality, right, the quality of living, the quality of life, and that, is there a legal area that can be tied to for a denial?
Sure, that's the compatibility
So
analysis.
compatibility and that could be tied together. Okay.
And as I said, in the memo that was submitted by the applicant's attorney, I agree that she has stated the standard of review for these types of cases. I don't think that's the end of the analysis. I mean, you have to apply that standard to each case. Each case is unique with its own facts. So I don't, I'm trying to avoid y'all having the impression that your hands are tied.
Right.
I mean, I think depending on how the record develops on Monday, you've got to follow where the record develops on Monday. But your hands are not necessarily tied one way or the other.
That's some good information.
So I just want to comment and say, this is, for the general public, I think this shows you that your commissioners, and I'm one of 7, but that we take all of the things that appear before us very seriously, and we deep dive into it, and I think you can tell that a lot of thought has been put in, even commissioners' questions as to what we can ask and can't ask. And I also just want to applaud our staff, because you are helping walk us through such a complicated issue that, sometimes in the political world, everyone thinks this is just really easy to do, and we do a lot of land use, and it's got a lot of tentacles to it legally. And so I just appreciate our team always providing the information and helping us tread lightly and being as cognizant as possible about the things that are around us that are landmines that we don't want to step in, we don't want to hinder the city of Lakeland at all. But I just want to, and thanks to the public too, because they've been very engaged in this process, and that is part of our responsibility as citizens, is to be engaged in the process and to, ask your commissioners these questions. And I also appreciate all my peers, because I think everyone takes it so seriously and really delves into the information that's provided by staff. But so that's going to be part of our discussion on Monday. But Palmer's very good at helping us stay with our guardrails legally, and I really appreciate that. I just wanted to say that publicly, because I know it's a lot of work to keep people who are not legal minds in the right lanes as we go forward. Yeah, and it's, when you sit on a city commission, I think that's why I think that governance closest to the people is the best, because this impacts everybody's daily life, and we take it really seriously, and we're not removed from it, and we drive on that same road and go to that same public. So it's just something that I hope citizens appreciate, that we really tap into. We don't make these arbitrary decisions, and they're not willy-nilly by any stretch of the imagination. So I just want to say thanks to everybody for that.
Just a couple of real quick procedural issues to wrap this up. One, similar to the last time, our recommendation would be, after I read the title, to not make it an emotion, but just open it up for the evidence, and then after you've heard everything, then make a motion to approve or not approve. And along those lines, we had a discussion about this a few meetings ago. There is a statute that says that with a zoning application, within a certain amount of time, the city commission has to either approve with conditions, or deny the application. So, if a motion is made to approve, for example, and it fails, legally that's not a denial. That's just no action. So if there's a motion to approve that doesn't get a majority vote, then you need to keep trying to maybe it's a motion to approve conditions or a motion to deny, but you need to reach one of those 3 results.
Everybody write that down.
Yeah.
Seriously.
That's a statutory thing. We have 3 options: approve with conditions, or deny. It's not failure to approve. That's not one of the options.
Yeah, I think we need to note that in our own, own pieces of paper in our minds, so that we don't have to talk about that again.
And I think the final thing was just, I did this last time as well. I'll just ask you, if after all, we've heard all the evidence, whether you've received any other communications from anybody, the applicant or the public, that has not been raised during the meeting on Monday, just to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to address any issues that haven't been raised. That's the kind of procedural due process thing. I'm just trying to keep this as clean as possible, avoid issues on appeal from things like that. So
there's no community redevelopment agency report. Now we have the city manager from our newly appointed deputy city manager. Congratulations. Emily Salone.
Thank you. So we have one item, and this is a standard continuing contract for professional lakes and watershed management services, and then authorizing the staff to negotiate continuing contracts with the shortlisted firms. So there were 7 firms that have responded to the city's RFQ, and the following 5 on your agenda were the ones that were selected based upon the bulleted criteria of capability and adequacy of professional personnel, response to the requirements in the announcement, experience and past performance, willingness to meet time and budget, and then office location from where work will be performed. And as a reminder, with CCNA, local preference does not play into this. So this is what we have, and we have, of course, very talented Lori Smith here if the city has any, or if the City Commission has any questions for her on this agenda.
Any questions for Ms. Lori?
Yes, Commissioner Reed?
Thank you. Is Panoni, is that the old Applied Aquatics?
No, I don't believe so.
Applied Aquatics didn't apply? Okay.
Other questions?
Just curious why the CCNA does not have the local preference.
So that's statutorily, and I will defer to our...
No, that's fine. That's all I need. It's just, okay.
Yeah, it's just the statute makes it very clear that it's based on pure qualifications, so that's kind of a side factor.
All right, any further questions? And just a note that there is one of the local,
Yeah, it is.
from what
Yeah.
is based out of Lakeland.
Okay. City Attorney, we're back to you.
All right, we have the first ordinance for first reading is an amendment to the general pension plan. This is just addressing a very unique situation. Whenever we hire a police officer or a firefighter, unless they're transferring from another agency, they have to go through a process to become certified sworn officers. And before they go through that process and achieve that sworn status, they technically do not qualify to be placed in the police or fire pension plans. And so right now what we're doing is placing those non-sworn firefighters or police officers in our general pension plan. And they're only in there for 6 months, 8 months at the most, very minimal participation, yet we have to track that time that they've been in that plan for basically their lifetime, which is an administrative inefficiency for a very minor benefit. So what our pension board of trustees and the attorney for the pension board is recommending is that as a kind of a holding place to put these people until they become sworn, we put them in the city's defined contribution plan instead of the general pension plan, and that basically just becomes their Kerry Whistler's here from pension, and that basically just becomes their money at that point, individually directed account. We don't have to track that, so it's a much more efficient way of doing this. We consulted with the unions for both police and fire, and they are in agreement with this. Kerry, did I miss anything?
No, and just when they do become a sworn officer or a firefighter, they would then transfer to like the police pension plan and to the fire. So it'd just be a minimal amount of time that they're in the defined contribution plan.
Any other questions? Yes, Commissioner.
So this doesn't, unless I haven't opened it up to read it, but all this does is it says that we're going to remove them. It doesn't say that they're going to go and apply into the direct compensation plan or whatever you just called it.
Yeah, it's in.
Okay, so if I open it up and read that,
You'll see
okay,
the underlined language in there.
okay. So not only are they being pulled out, but it's a two-part, pulled out and then placed.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Commissioner Reed.
So effectively, they're going to be in a self-directed program until they roll over, and there won't be any tax consequences to them, I hope.
The money, the contributions would come out of their paycheck pre-tax, correct? So it'd be tax deferred.
But then when they move it into their other pension plan, it won't hinder them.
Well, they wouldn't move those funds. Those funds would stay in that plan.
Okay. So that'd be just
throughout their
separate for the
career.
6 months. And
Correct.
Then, okay, then they'd start fresh with their pension.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yes.
Any other, yes, Commissioner.
So if they stay in the fund, how does that eliminate the need to track?
It's a different plan than the pension plan, so they would still, the defined contribution plan is like similar to a 401k in the private sector, so those funds would stay there. We use Voya as the company, and so they wouldn't lose that money, it would just stay there throughout their career at the city. And then when they become certified, they would go into the actual like police or fire pension plan, and that's when that would begin.
So when it's where it is currently, it's some kind of regulation that the city has to have to actually report on those funds, and that's the tracking versus just the person knowing they have that much in that account.
Yeah, it's a different kind of tracking because they're two different plans.
And it's simpler in this new one.
Yes.
When it's not pension plan to pension plan, it's like a 401k, like Gary
Correct.
said,
Okay.
to a pension.
Okay.
Yep.
Could that be combined with like deferred comp contributions, that type of thing?
Yes.
For the individual
Yes, it's
officers?
similar to like a deferred comp. So even when they move to the pension plan, they can still contribute to like our deferred compensation plan,
Okay.
and they can continue to do that.
Okay.
It's just the way it is now, they're going into the general pension plan, and sometimes they're only in there for 4 to 6 weeks, and then they become certified, and we have to keep track of that. Like if they have a 25-year career, they may have a small pension from the general fund, for like 4 to 6 weeks that we have to keep track of. So it's just administratively, it's difficult.
And again, we consulted with both unions, and they're both in agreement with this approach.
Okay, everybody good? Next item.
All right, the next item also relates to pension. This is just for the police pension plan, and this is recognizing some of the actuarial gains and reducing the contribution rates for the police officers in the pension plan. I think Jeff Stearns is here. If you want to just briefly describe what we're doing here?
Sure, this is pretty much identical to what you approved for the general plan a couple months ago. We went back and redid the actuarial analyses for all the pension plans and recognized the significant gains that they had made. Because literally for the general plan is more than 100% funded as we speak. When you do a funding ratio based on estimated liabilities and assets. This is the same thing we're doing for the police plan, which we also, negotiated and talked to the police board about and the police union about, so they're on board with this. What it does is recognize all those gains, recognizes all the money that we deposited into the various pension plans as a result of the pension notes that we did in 2020. And the net result of that, when you redo the actuarial analysis, is that contribution levels can come down significantly. In this case, for both city and for officers, their contributions will go down by about 2.25 percentage points on a going forward basis. Then obviously every year you redo the analysis based on each year's results, and it will fluctuate from there on out. But we're basically taking notice of the fact that we are substantially better funded than we've been. Literally, in the case of police, 99% funded. In the case of the general plan, what you did a couple months ago, we're more than 100% funded, which is the first time we've been at those levels in 20 years. Also, two other things are happening in the police plan, similar to what happened with the general plan, is they're reducing the rate they're assuming they're going to be able to earn in the future from where they were, which was about 7.3% down to 6.75, recognizing the fact that returns in the future may not be as robust as they were in the past. So knowing that we're shooting for a lower target, we have a better chance, obviously, of hitting that target. The board is recognizing that, and that has some implications for funding, for contribution levels. The other thing that this ordinance change does is it authorizes using a small portion of their assets to provide a one-time payment to retirees, roughly on the order of $2,000 for police retirees. And we did a similar thing for general plan employees as well, a couple months ago.
Right.
So that requires a change to the ordinance to affect that. Those three things.
Commissioner Madden.
Could you just repeat for me, does this, so certainly love it, following everything that we've done, think it's great. Certainly timely with inflation and all the other things. And I know the police, that was one of the things that they argued in the past that I've heard, that they give a lot of a contribution, which makes, comparable pay with other agencies, not so comparable when they're paying more, in for their contribution, things like that. So I'm getting the big picture. I'm a little worried even about the 6.75. I mean, I know we kind of were slow in making the decision to make sure we made it through the global pandemic. And surprisingly, we did great, and this is a wonderful thing. I know we're not, here in the predictability of, crystal ball world, but, hearing gas prices and inflation and all of that, like this is just for, on an annual, like what we're approving is just for, like, this will switch and their contribution level will be smaller. Is that for the next year? Or what did you say?
That'll be for the fiscal year we're in and the next fiscal year. And then future fiscal years will be affected. Each pension plan has an actuary, and every year they do an actuarial analysis. The actuary looks at what they've actually earned, when people have retired, what salary increases have been, how long people are living, all those factors. And every year they redo and they reset the contribution rates for both the city and for employees in the police plan, the fire plan, the general plan. So every year we update the assumptions.
Okay, so it's annual. I mean, it's kind of nice even with the Lake Electric, we do quarterly looks at the fuel rates and things because, with the way things fluctuate, you'd hate to, there's just, you better know sooner rather than later,
Don't miss opportunities.
Yeah, so anyway, I just want to make sure that was the annual, we'll be looking at it again another year based on the actual.
Thank you, and I think Stephanie made a great point there again. I just wondered about the reductions here again because of inflation, and I don't think it's going to be short-lived. But I would hate to we'll have to get an increase in another couple of years substantially there again. I'm sure the inflation numbers keep changing, but invariably I think they're going to be going up substantially. Yeah, and the question is how that's going to, one of the major factors that affects what the contribution rates are going to be, the demographics make a bunch of difference, but the single biggest factor is what you earn on the assets that are in each of the pension funds. So by virtue of reducing the rates that we're assuming, that pushes up contribution rates a little higher than they would otherwise be to compensate for the fact that we think we're going to earn less in the future. So the police have come down from 730 to 6.75. The general plan came down from 7.25 to 6.75. The fire plan has recently reduced theirs from about 7.25 down to 7 percentage points. The state looks at those actuarial reports every year, and they have been putting increasing pressure on every year for every pension plan to reduce their assumptions. That's an assumption that's up to each board, each pension board, but they're moving in the right direction. Assuming that maybe the future won't be quite as robust as we've seen over the last, 5 or 10 years in the equity markets in particular, and recognizing that you might not earn as much, you got to put more in. There's no magic. And one question they answered a lot of them, do they get COLA as well? No, there are no automatic cost of living increases in any of the pension plans. They are subject to literally recommendations from each of the pension boards, but they always have to be approved by the city commission. Only the commission can authorize a pension benefit.
Yes.
Thank you. The other question I have is, so does number of employees factor in? So we've heard that we need more police, and so if we are getting a large number of new officers, how does that affect this?
Well, the way rates are set is as a percentage of payroll. So officers have to put in a percentage of in the case of police, a percentage of their salary. The city has to put in a percentage of their salary as the employee or employer contribution. So if you have more people, more money will automatically go in because all the new officers will have to pay a portion of their salary, and the city will have to pay more if we have a higher payroll base. But it doesn't necessarily affect the analysis directly.
Could still be as a percentage.
It still has a percentage. Now, some will depend on, generally speaking, newer officers will have lower salaries than, more experienced officers, so there's a little balance. It'll have a minor effect, but that'll be picked up in the next actuarial analysis. But the fact that it's done on a percentage basis compensates for the size, in essence.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Stern.
Thank you. Okay.
All right, next ordinance is a request by Park Street Ministries to convert a existing group home to a duplex on some property on Myrtle Street.
So the property is located at the northwest corner of East Myrtle Street and Stella Avenue. It's about a 4,500 square foot building, previously served as a group home, most recently by Peace River Center, and then they donated the property to Park Street Ministries in '21. It's actually a non-conforming use, but we have provisions within the Land Development Code that allow a non-conforming use to be converted to a lesser non-conforming use through the conditional use process. So that's the process they're going through to create a 2-unit dwelling that Parker Street intends to rent to families within the neighborhood.
Questions for Teresa?
Good.
Okay,
All right,
That's a great thing.
the next two items are related to a request to build a self-storage facility with some retail on that property at the corner of Memorial and Lake Parker Avenue. I think there's a billboard there right now.
Yes. So this site previously served as a manufacturer home sales center, but has been vacant for some time, since the 2000s. The request is for a self-storage facility. Because of provisions within the comprehensive plan for the existing future land use, the amount of square footage that they were seeking exceeds the maximum allowed by that land use designation. So that's why they're seeking both a future land use change and then also a modification to a prior planned unit development for this property to allow for that self-storage facility. One of the things that the staff worked with the applicant on was incorporating some retail into the building, so 3,000 square feet of retail space, and that was twofold. One, to then meet the mixed-use requirement of the new future land use designation, and then also to provide some activity along the street frontage there on Memorial. So this one, we do have some site just to the east of the former second DCA. So these are some renderings of what the facility will look like. And then this one didn't have any calls or emails received from anyone from the public, so it was fairly an easy one to get through.
no, any questions? Okay, I'll go last. You go ahead, Commissioner Music or Walker.
Walker,
Go first.
Well, first of all, I want to say I'm glad to see something going on in the space there. It's been empty, I guess, since I was a child. Maybe I'm just kidding.
No, not that long.
See, you trying to get my age.
Dinosaurs. There are dinosaurs on it then.
Anyway, but I'm glad to see that, and I think it may help enhance the community there, area. Certainly appreciate the fact that, we're allowing some retail to go along with what's going to be there, help support that corridor. And I was glad to see that we're not going to have any boats and RVs. That's not going to be a part of that.
Right.
Correct.
That was a
Outdoor
good thing, I think, as well. I just think it's going to probably be hopefully a good thing to help enhance that area, whether we try to have some revitalization along that East Memorial corridor there, especially so.
Yeah, we are seeing additional activity, Town Center, Sears Town.
They're redoing.
That was recently purchased through foreclosure, and the new buyer, they're planning on getting a whole new sort of restaurant retail strip in the existing center. That would be done by right under the zoning. I think they want to add maybe space for 6 or 8 restaurants.
Wow.
But I believe they're going to be marketing that as maybe like a sort of an ethnic kind of startup space for those type of things there. And then to the east there at the southeast corner of Ingram and East Memorial, where the district court of appeals used to be, which is got demolished.
Yeah.
We have the, a proposal there, they're going to be coming forward with land use and zoning change to allow for some type of retail. It could be potentially a small grocery store like an Aldi, or maybe car wash, fast food convenience store, stuff like that. But there is some movement there as well.
Yeah.
Commissioner Musil.
So, and I was just looking at the information, when you talk about the fact that, we didn't have any,
Opposition.
any kerfluffle about this. When you look at the obviously we have the placards, hey, we're going to do this, and then we have a 500-foot mailer. 500-foot radius from there is nobody, right? So and I think it's great. I echo what you're saying. I think that's great. But when we're mailing that out, and you look at the perimeter of what's around there, does it go to the owner of those properties, or does it go to the tenant of those properties? Is it mailed to the physical?
Property owner. We use property appraiser records, so
Okay.
yes, it goes to the property owner.
Yeah, the property that's out is that's the storage yard and the other warehouse there.
Yeah.
So nothing really there. And to the north, of course, the old mall, the church there.
Yeah.
So, really,
The church to the west of this one.
yeah,
Right.
and there's
Yeah, and I think it's only going to improve everything around there. But that's just curious because there's not much within 500 feet.
correct.
To that point, do we have, I'm looking at community economic development people, an overview, I don't want to say catalyst plan, but do we have a plan for that whole memorial corridor? As, Commissioner Walker talks about the entrance from the north into the city of Lakeland and what that looks like, that's coming in from the east. Do we have a game plan as far as like an overarching, something we could see?
Well, to the extent that it's within the community redevelopment area in Midtown.
Yeah.
And that, they do have specific programs that apply with within this area, like facade improvement and other things. Yes, there is that kind of redevelopment plan for the area. But we don't have anything outside of that specifically talks about maybe what we'd like to see in the future, other than what the zoning is that kind of says, here's what the uses will be.
I think, and this would be low on the priority list of things we deal with, but looking at that visually, just like we're looking at a downtown catalyst and a downtown west catalyst, and that is an area that, historically, we had the first Red Lobster and Darden restaurant, and that's the way we came from the east side of the county. We would always come 92 into town, and so, when we were here on field trips, we would always, one bus would park and you would go to Arby's or Steak and Shake or Pizza Hut or McDonald's. They could park one school bus and all the band dorks could go to any one of those restaurants. And so, I just wonder if there is something visually for the commission that we could kind of dream about. We don't ever want to neglect any piece of, the community, and that part of the community, I feel like this is exciting, but, what do we ultimately want to see happen out there as we're entertaining all this growth?
Yeah, we've had some thoughts over the years. In 2019, we did amend the zoning code, you may recall. And one of the major changes was used car lots. In C2, we now require conditional use. So Memorial Boulevard particularly was one of those areas historically where there was a blight on used car lots. And they're very sort of some low-value uses, but they don't bring a lot of benefits to the community.
Right.
And they tend to create a stigma that basically this is a place that's declining that you don't want to invest in. So we do see that a lot of people that are coming forward that maybe want to do those, they don't want to go through that process. That's maybe deterring them.
Right.
So that will open up those properties for other possible uses. But also we require separation from certain uses like pawn shops, payday loans, other things, which along that corridor, historically, we're very concentrated. I think this area in particular, you have a number of brick-owned places, pawn shops, payday loans. And again, they send a certain signal to the market that this is a place not worth investing in. So we did do that in 2019.
Thank you.
Besides the regulatory side of that, I think that, it would be helpful to have some type of illustrative vision plan, particularly as we get people coming in asking about some of those declining properties like the old motel. Because right now we're just doing it on a project by project basis. And as like when this project came in, telling them, okay, this is where we want to be placed closer to the street, we want to have retail, we want to look a certain way. So it'd be easier if we did have some overall plan to just
be able to point people to this. I think that'd be great. That'd be awesome. Commissioner Reed?
Thank you. There again, this is down the street from my home.
Yes, it is.
And there again, most of the neighbors, because of the 500 feet and being commercial, knew very little about it. So I've discussed it with them, and I don't think anybody in the neighborhood really has an issue with it. The only, site plan, I haven't really looked at it that much, but that property is extremely difficult to get into. It's a right-in, right-out only. I just hope they don't change that in any manner, because
Will remain right in, right out on both North Lake Parker and Memorial.
of course, with the new apartments going back to the north of it, and then in light of the site over by the Larson Power Plant, going to be another 400 or 500 homes there. Generally, so it's going to be, it'll be a new, because there again, if we had a plan from Gary Road to the west, particularly on the south side of the road, the lake is on the opposite side, so there's not much we can do to plan anything for there. It'd be interesting to see something, but I think from the neighbors that I've talked to, it's kind of out of our sight, out of our area, because we're stuck back, further back, and behind the commercial sector, and it's just going to be there, per se, to accommodate some storage.
Commissioner Walker?
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Quick question. You mentioned that about the development of the homes there coming in.
Yep.
Is it moving forward with that project at all?
I don't believe we've received subdivision plans yet for that.
For the townhomes?
Cypress Point for Causey, the old Causey property.
It's stagnant ever
I
since.
think
they may be going their subdivision review right now.
Okay, yeah, I hadn't seen anything come through yet, but it's possible they are in for at least subdivision for that.
So no movement yet, you say?
It sounds like they are in for subdivision
Yeah.
plan
Yeah,
review,
okay.
yes, so they're civil construction plans, but
Okay.
I just haven't seen it.
Thank you. All right, any further questions or comments? All right.
So that was 4 and 5, the comp plan amendment and the zoning. Under resolutions, we have the companion resolution to the equalization rule. Number 2 is modifying a grant agreement with the state for improvements to the intersection of US 92 and County Line Road. This simply extends the construction deadline period for purposes of that grant to June 30th, 2023. So that's the project where we're adding turn lanes, receiving lanes at the intersection of County Line Road and US 92. Ryan Lazenby's here if you have any questions about that project.
Can we, I went through the packet, can we see a rendering of that, like a?
I don't have one with me, but
Yeah, but like, can you, like, attach it?
Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions?
They were working on that intersection the other day when I was there, coming down from I-4.
Is the lane, I'm sorry.
Your turn, yeah.
I was there yesterday or the day before, and there was no access going across the railroad track heading south. Is that temporary?
Yeah.
Or is that, okay.
It's temporary. It's because CSX is doing signal work for the traffic signals at the railroad inside their right-of-way. So that was to facilitate that work.
Okay, we went through our finance director's report, and then utility, you guys want to hit the high points of this? I'm looking at Ramona, or just wait until the utility meeting at 11?
Any reason to not wait, but
Okay, and then that puts us to the mayor and members of the city commission. I wanted to address really quick, well, maybe not really quick, but we received an email from Tracy via the mayor on May 31st, so Tuesday of this week, regarding the employment consultation for annual reviews, and he detailed a plan of utilizing Commissioner Selvage's, but said we were open to facilitating discussion on how, if anybody had questions or wanted to talk about that. And I wanted to recommend that we also look at Emily Rogers Consulting as a group to maybe get a proposal from her organization as well, to look at reviewing both our city attorney and our city manager. Since we're pivoting out of the Dr. Ross and into a new realm, I called her individually and said, hey, we have this process. Would you even be interested in doing something like this? She does this regularly for other CEOs and groups around the community and outside of Lakeland. So she said she would be interested in it, and I just wanted to put that in front of you all as another option. And the mayor said that if anybody else had options, we could discuss those as long as he would get the information by June 7th, which is next week. So she felt like she could share that information, do a proposal by then to us. Yes, Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I think that's a good point, that if we're moving away from Dr. Ross and bringing in somebody new, that we allow others to put their name in if they're interested as well. Was that, I wasn't clear from that email from Tracy, were we considering a mid-year review? Is that to get somebody on board to do, which would be a May, June timeline, or is that gearing up for the annual review process?
I think it's gearing up for annual.
I thought that you're gonna remember that weird.
Because he would,
Yeah.
so it'd be November would be for Sean, and then Palmer, what's your start date?
I think we're at the same time at this point.
Right, you're about the same time,
Right.
so we would be at 6 months, right? Like
Right now,
to
yeah.
May,
Yeah.
so not
Okay.
anymore. So
Okay.
Isn't it yours and the city manager and the city attorney go with the fiscal year?
Yeah, and
Okay,
October.
so that'd be
November
That's what I
October.
thought, fiscal
Okay.
year, yeah.
So
I do
then,
like it, just coming back to that discussion we had a couple of weeks ago about,
Yes.
I like having a standard mid-year
I do
review
too.
as part of the process. If we're transitioning to a different consultant and firm, then we may not be able to do that this year, but I would love to see that as part of whoever's proposing to
Yes.
have that as a standard piece of the process.
Well, we,
I had one more thing. And so what if there are others, in addition to Emily Rogers, who might be interested? And is there a way for us to, I'm not saying we need to put out an RFP, but how do we just cast a net to say if there are other firms locally who might be interested, who do this, we would like to hear from you?
well, and that's
I'm looking
why,
at our deputy city manager for,
So thank you for not wanting to do an RFP, because that would lengthen the time, but I mean, I think you just cast the net verbally, so you
Okay.
said it,
If there are others who are-
ask
Yeah.
around, especially
Yeah.
if you're looking for local.
I would want people who are out there who are in this field to know what we're doing and have the chance to
Yeah.
submit their name to.
well, and I think what was really great about the email is that it started with getting what the best practices are from ICMA, which is the city manager. So Emily, thank you for providing that to the mayor. And I actually sent that packet to Emily Rogers to look at from her consulting standpoint, because I know that we had talked at one point when we did this review, and I can't remember if it was before Sean's 6-month review, we talked about a 360, and so that is something that Emily Rogers does, her consulting firm, as an addendum. It's not the end-all be-all, like the only mechanism. So that was something that I thought would be really important as we're moving forward and, working with our teams and making sure our culture is really good at the city of Lakeland. I think that would be really a great part for leadership to have that tool in their tool belt for themselves. And that would be a good addition. Commissioner Walker, did you want to say something earlier?
I was complimenting what Commissioner McLeod said, because I think it was, I'm going back to my mind, Commissioner Reed, but was it 4 years, 5, 6, 8 years ago? When we first talked about, and it might be a little longer, about the 6-month review process for both the city manager and city attorney. Because at the time, Tim McCausland was our city attorney, and Tony, of course, was coming in as the city manager at the time. I think that's when we, as a commission at that time, thought it would be better to start doing these 6-month reviews,
It's a good pulse check.
1 year.
Yeah.
Because Tony was coming on at the time, as our new city manager, so it's something we even asked for to be continued, so it should be done anyway.
Commissioner Madden.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, for bringing this up. So you hit on I had isolated my comments to one particular portion of the information that was sent to us from the ICMA credentialing program. And it's something that I've asked for, for the last however many years that we've done this, is the 360-degree assessment. Now, I found that depending on who is helping us through the process of making the evaluation, whether they come from more of a city government perspective or from a private perspective, determines the outcome of whether or not we've had a 360-degree assessment. And the outcome obviously has been that we have not had one in the last 4 years. So I know that my colleague and I, Commissioner McLeod, really wanted some kind of survey, from the employees. And I know even at a small company like Madden, we have to have 100% participation in our little employees telling us how we're doing, with our benefits and everything. And it's just, I think, so important to be able to hear. I know that the rationale in the past has been, that could put someone's job in jeopardy, or they could use that, with litigation to say that's why I was moved, to a different department or, whatever, because I spoke the truth about how I felt about the management. So I just, this 360-degree assessment portion of the ICMA thing that Emily sent us said, it's just the self-development tool. They recommend it. Generally speaking, the 360-degree assessment consists of an employee obtaining feedback from supervisors, subordinates, and peers. In this case, manager completes a self-evaluation as well, which is typically the only thing we get is a self-evaluation, with a sample of the workforce providing the subordinate feedback. In some instances, feedback is also obtained from those outside the organization, which we kind of ask the manager, how they feel like they're doing with instead of hearing from, chamber, LADC, different groups, which I think is really important. Some jurisdictions include the 360-degree assessment as part of the manager's appraisal process. The ICMA voluntary credentialing program also uses this method as part of maintaining the credential. However, they limit it to behavioral questions. They do not cover progress towards organizational goals. In most cases, 360-degree assessment is conducted digitally via the internet. Raters are provided evaluation forms and returned to an independent third party via the internet in order to assure anonymity. Yes, and confidentiality. One of the chief benefits of the 360-degree assessment process, it provides feedback on competencies that are not regularly seen. And I will say, for the first 3 years of doing my assessment, I'm like, okay, so I have purview over 2 employees, and I have no idea behind the scenes how their subordinates feel they're being treated. I except for on TV, I don't see how they're, treating their subordinates. I'm not in a part of that culture or that team. Right. I'm separated from it. And so I feel like that is why I've asked for this, because how can I grade someone on how their management is, and I have everyone's afraid to death to tell me how they feel, because their job is in jeopardy. So I feel like this kind of gave me rationale. That's why I'm sort of reading it briefly. You have it in your packets. You can read it as well, that if it's something that is suggested, not just from us,
the ICMA,
right, that is important, that's even from a someone else, because we're coming from private sector thinking, of course we should do this, and it's like, no, we shouldn't. And so to me, that plays into our decision on Commissioner Salvage. I'm trying to remember which side he fell on that issue. Right, and so that makes me reticent to want to use his approach. Right. Because it's something I really, I feel like we've had a lot of change, and I know that we're in wage wars and all different reasons why people are leaving organizations and workplaces and want remote work and all of the things after COVID. Yeah. So it's not at all pointing towards our city manager. It's just that for us to have a comprehensive view of his leadership, I feel like it's
You're going to talk to people he's leading.
Yeah.
Commissioner Music.
So, and that's, I think that's a great point. I do think that's something that I would get behind as well. How long did Dr. Ross do these evaluations?
10 years.
Okay.
I've been 13.
Well, then longer.
Okay.
I was basing on a decade.
So my question is this, and not to do an RFP, but if we're looking at getting a relationship with somebody where our last one was over a decade, I would like to make sure that whoever we're talking to, if it's just somebody that's hearing this right now and says, hey, this is what my business does, with us not having an exact RFP that says, here's the items we're looking for, here's our scope of work. I'm concerned that we wouldn't get exactly apples for apples when we're receiving.
I don't know that hiring someone for a decade, it was a year by,
I understand that.
It's a year by year basis, so I don't think that is, and here's the other thing we need to think about, and with regard to in-city management Lakeland's not very typical. I think the average city manager serves 3 to 5 years max, right? Like if you aggregate.
It's under 10.
Right, it's under 10, it's well under 10. So when you look at, Tony's predecessor was here for 12, Doug.
Yeah.
And then you have Tony for 5 or whatever, which is probably about normal. So we're not necessarily married as far as, in some communities, city managers come and go. And I'm not saying we should do that ever. But what I'm saying, if you look at the way that this system works, that the public sector works, we're kind of above average in retention of city managers. If you look at other communities, they burn through them a lot quicker than we do. So when I'm looking at a consultant, and somebody coming in, I am not uptight about changing the consultant and changing the method of review. I don't think we should do that annually, but I would be more apt, especially as a leader myself, to be reviewed on a continual basis by different sets of eyes and a different even rubric and different kind of measurement tools. That would help me as a leader. So that's what I'm thinking out. So I'm not thinking that whoever this consultant is that I don't feel like we're locked in or looking at something for that amount of time. That's just me. I don't think that's a normal situation. I could be wrong though. Commissioner Walker, you have much more wisdom on this.
Well, I would tell you that we are unique in some respect, but certainly I applaud the uniqueness because it shows that we probably have done well considering other cities. Now, you remember now, if you take a poll of the number of municipalities in our county alone, and you comparing ourselves to others, it's like we can't. And you find those others that do and have seen them change city managers like, whoa. But I think we should be applauded because of what we've had and how well we've done. And seeing our city managers, our city management staff do very well to operate the kind of city we have. And they're kind of, I think, many business components that we bring for our city. I'm not, and I agree with you in some respect, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. I don't think we need to be married to a consultant to do our reviews. Like in the case of Dr. Ross, 10, 12 years or more. But still, I think it's important that some of the things that we're looking at, which we have to do. I'm almost leaning toward what you said, Commissioner Music. Why not do an RFP? Let's find out who's out there. I don't know who's out there. It's not something I deal with. But you may deal with it because of situations you have been involved in, my dear sister. But I have no problem with doing an RFP to see who's out there, because I cannot recommend anybody. If I had to ask who would I recommend, I don't know who to recommend. Now, when you mentioned Emily, my light bulb came on. Yeah, she is. That's what I know about her.
Yeah.
But should we, for time's sake, is it feasible that we can do something like that or not?
I don't know, an RFP time-wise would be in our best interest since we're going to do it based on our fiscal year this year. Now, I think that this conversation needs to continue more often than when we have it, so that in the future we know that this year we're going to look at Mr. Selvage's plan and Emily's plan. If somebody else submits to us, if anybody knows, throw out, push out, hey, if you're interested, let us know, because the mayor had said in his email he wanted to know, what to do by June 7th, which is a quick turnaround. So I think for this time around, we probably need to not do an RFP. However, if it's the will of the commission, I think that should be on our purview for later in the year. It wouldn't necessarily do it for this annual review, but if we wanted to RFP it out for next spring, you know what I'm saying? Like find someone in the meantime and not wait to do it in the future. And whoever does this one can certainly apply for that RFP. This could just be the stopgap.
Well,
in the essence of time.
And I can appreciate that, but I'm still hearing from a couple colleagues that commented, because I don't know who else is out there. And you mentioned it just now, Commissioner McLeod, do we, I'm hearing it, maybe hear it all. I have no pause and say we should not move forward and take the couple that we know about right now, whoever, someone else may recommend, because of the time crunch we're under, in this sense, because the annual review time is coming up. You know, it's June now, but it'll be here before you know it.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. You know, we were fortunate. We had Bill Yoki, Trina Strickland, Roger Har.
Yeah, good vote.
And then we started the process. I think we didn't start the real process until Doug came on about review, to my knowledge. And so we've had longevity. We have had longevity with all those. And it's been self-promoting, I guess, within. Subsequently, there again, Greg Collins is a potential person as well.
I didn't think about that. That's a good idea.
Just to throw three in the mix that we know right off the bat, we've had personal relation with to some degree. But of course, June 7th doesn't have to be a finite date.
Right.
You know, he can say what he wants to, but it may be July 1st. We have time, but it gives us time. But I really don't, because it's going to be a short period of time, and maybe it'll be an RFQ for later on, but I don't think it's necessary right now for a short period of time. Again, we probably have a handful right now we could look at and interview if we have the same parameters, and with the understanding this is a one-shot deal, and then go from there. And,
So I would be curious to just ask my colleagues what they, if that is not something that Mr. Selvage provides as a 360 review, is that something that my colleagues would want an Emily Rogers to come alongside and augment the process by providing the 360 review, or is it just me that wants the 360 review?
I brought that up as well in his, when we started doing this. When I came on the commission, I think 360s are an amazing opportunity, and I think that we're missing out to really help, leadership really see any blind spots, but also, strengthen their strengths too, and having good feedback on what they do really, really well. So, I don't know if you remember that, but I did say that back then. And so and that's why I reached out to Emily, because I knew specifically she did that.
To say we need to have that this time?
360.
It just could be the two of us, but I'd be curious, is that something that we would like to say, okay?
And I think that can be provided as an augment. I don't think, and Emily hasn't said that, but when we verbally spoke, she had mentioned if that process wanted, if the process that Commissioner Salvage is doing is based on Dr. Ross's process, just to have continuity, that 360 could live as an addendum or a support mechanism. It doesn't have to be an end-all be-all. It could just be in addition to. So we could do that.
It sounds like it's mainly done on the internet. It kind of, to me, fills that survey that we were hopeful for. If the company or if Emily can do that, if she's got the technology
bandwidth,
to take a sample, size of each department or however it is that they do that. I don't know if she's got the technology to do that confidentially, but that kind of, in my hope, is that it either sort of fills that desire for the survey or gets a legitimate 360. But to me, I feel like one more year of filling the blanks and giving a rating of 1 to 5 on how well the management is going. It is not so that we have more scrutiny of nefarious activity. It's so that we have more concrete evidence to give constructive aid to our manager to be the very best manager he can be. That is what these are about. People in the private sector have 360s because they want to become a better leader. They want to communicate more effectively. They want to be able to find out where their blind spots are. And, have resources given to them, a particular book that might help with a low point on their communication style or their management style. So I feel like if we're really, we have 2 employees to really, to kind of sharpen their saw and to be able to have an impact on for our city. And I feel so limited on the tools that I have to be able to, I said to Sean the first year, not to say that I don't want to reinforce that I was not as supportive of you as a manager, because, you are a manager now. I want you to be the best you can be. but I know we're in dynamic growth. I'd like to see people who have been there before, that same trajectory. So before this mid-year review, will you go to this conference? And he did, to his credit, he went to that conference. But other than maybe identifying a conference or suggesting things, we are very limited. And so years can go by very quickly, and there's really no sharpening of the saw, no additional skills added unless we're strategic and focused. And I think that, we need to collectively be concerned that we're going into uncharted territory with the growth that we're in for. And we all need to hope for the very best manager and management and city staff and organization that we can have. So this is not to reflect poorly on our current management. This is absolutely to bring about the very best management that we can have, that I think we need. And so whoever provides the best tool for that, and if it's not Mr. Selvage, maybe because he's been on this commission and he's aware, and he could up to speed, step right up and offer some similar process to the past. I feel like that's not enough for what I would hope for. Then I would hope for the augment to come from Emily Rogers.
And and I will forward this through staff so it's public record. The consulting company, Emily Rogers, had sent to me in response to my request from her, sort of what the Leadership Circle Profile 360, the tool that she uses, she sent it on to me, so I'm happy to share that with you all to look at too, because maybe that fills the gap of the 6-month thing, is that we do that and still maintain what we're doing with Selvage's company. I don't know, and we can discuss that further when the mayor is here. But one of the things, just so you know, from the evaluation standpoint of a 360 circle profile, it's the person who's being reviewed identifies their evaluators too. So these people can be your boss, who is one person, but obviously in this case 7, and the score is not anonymous, which that's what we're used to, public record, especially in our world. A boss is boss, which doesn't apply in this situation. Peers, a minimum of 3 people, scores are anonymous. Direct reports, minimum of 3 people, scores are anonymous. Other, minimum of 3 people, scores are anonymous. For instance, customers, industry affiliations, community or nonprofit affiliations. So that's kind of their, this consulting firm's kind of purview of the 360 of who that would entail, which is really interesting to me personally. And then in the overview, let me get back to this other piece. Again, this is just something she provided, is like this entire graphic. This sort of goes through creative leadership competencies. The top half of the circle is competencies to contribute to a leader's effectiveness. They measure key leadership behaviors, internal assumptions that lead to high fulfillment, high achievement leadership, and then it's broken down into systems and relations and all that kind of stuff. And then the other is the reactive, which this part of the circle maps self-limiting reactive tendencies and leadership behaviors. Dimensions reflect inner beliefs and assumptions that limit effectiveness, authentic expression, empowering leadership. So that's just those blind spots, that we're talking about. But I'll have this forwarded through staff so you guys can see it and look at it and see if that's something you're interested in. But with regard to having a 360, is everybody interested, or is it only Commissioner Madden and I that are interested in a 360, or can we do a thumbs up if you're interested in a 360?
I'm trying to stay out of this as much as possible, but with regard to the 360, I know I keep hearing the word anonymous.
Yeah.
And because of Florida's public records law, if somebody puts their name on a review, and I don't care if it's on an external server, internet, site, that's a public record. If a record has to do with city business, it's a public record regardless of where it is. So you've got to be careful with how you do these 360s if you want anonymity, because if someone's put their name on something, that's public record.
Okay. Commissioner Walker.
I think that's one of the things that maybe I got question some previous commission when we had that same kind of discussion came up. And if you could correct me, Commissioner Reed, if I say something that you think you remember too. But we got to look at the kind of form of government that we have, council manager form of government, and then when we look at those kind of things such as that, and especially some of those kind of comments going to be public record. I think we got to make sure how we derive to what we want it to be. We got to be very cautious.
Of course.
because we don't want to do anything. I don't want to do anything. Have you do anything? Of course, when this all comes about, I'm gone anyway. So, but I will make sure that you are left with a situation that would help support and not bring about a challenge. Now, even though it might have been mentioned in the information that was received by Ms. Emily, but I'm concerned then again about the kind of operation we have, council manager, form of government. How much deep diving we can do outside of the two people that we're responsible for? If you hear what I'm saying, because I want to make sure we get the best too. Who would not want to make sure they got the best and doing what's best for the entire operation? But I'm just kind of like, how?
You said you don't have to put your name.
Yeah, but people don't.
If you put your name, then it would be public record, but you don't have to put the name.
Commissioner McLeod?
Thank you. And I would be curious to hear from Emily or any others how they would approach the confidentiality piece of it within the public sector. And I'm sure there are others who are handling that.
Yeah.
So I would not, to me, that's not something that we can't overcome.
Right.
So I would strongly support it.
Yeah.
Do we know why June 7th is the mayor's deadline on?
Do you know?
I believe the intent is just to move the process
Move it.
along.
I was just wondering if we could extend that. I know it's not here, but what if we said June 10th, a week from today, or even to submit names, or if anybody is listening, or we know, it gives us at least a week to get those names to him, but still within, it's timely. It's not, we're not kicking it out a month. And then maybe our commitment is for 1 year with this consultant, and after that, because we could do an RFP if we needed to or felt like, but with the time constraints, I wouldn't want to try and go down the road of an RFP right now.
Yeah. Commissioner Music?
Yeah, and I agree. I think that's the prudent way to do it, is to get somebody as a gap filler right now, and then to do that. But I just think having, like we do in the RFPs, here's what we're looking for. We come to a consensus and say that, as opposed to just hoping that we get everything. And that was my concern when I did, I've just done one of the reviews, was, I was reading these questions and I told Larry, I said, I have no idea.
Exactly.
And I told him, I said, I have no idea. I said, tell me how to do this, because I just don't know. So I'm like you with my employees. And so, give me the big ugly, give me the whatever, so that we can be better as an individual and as a team. So to me, having more data is just better for us. I can't judge anybody on their management style because I've not talked to anybody and don't have any data on that. I can tell how I've interacted with them individually.
Sure.
But not from a management style at all. So I think that's great, and I think that I'm sure Dr. Ross has done wonderful for all this time, but I just think now that we have an opinion to trenches, it's a great opportunity for us to all say, here's what I feel we've been missing.
Yeah.
So, good.
Great discussion.
Yeah, thank you.
That's really, really great discussion. I'm glad that we all had time to, that was a quick turnaround.
So we're in agreement that the date of June 7th can be pushed forward?
Yeah, I think I'd be even willing to go to the June 17th.
Sure.
That would give 2 full weeks, just since this was a holiday week.
Yeah.
Because I went back to look, I'm like, did I miss that in my inbox? Was it there sooner than I thought, since I was away last weekend, but it just came in on Tuesday. So, I think that would be good recommendation to the mayor, and
Yes.
and then we can move forward from there.
And not to beat a dead horse, but I do want to note, like this, I feel like sometimes in government, because maybe the emails where you receive, like a survey is to just get like the 500-foot boundary to hear how terrible people feel. That is not at all. This is not like, I hate, I like the road diet, I hate the road diet.
Right.
This is strategic questioning to say, in this particular department, wow, he only makes a round to that department once a year, or has never been in that department, so that you can kind of add some things to make sure, that there is a systematic approach to things, and that there's good communication, and there's good, and so if they've done it, obviously the tool that you use, or the person that you use, has done that and has research to prove that their methodology and their survey results are giving meaty, constructive, strategic feedback, not just complaints or disgruntled employee.
Right.
They can do that. They can send us an email for that anytime.
Right.
And they do.
Commissioner Music?
Yeah, I think, again, back to the private sector, is I don't I don't want to hold somebody accountable for an issue that someone has told me when they don't know that it's an issue, right? Circling the department once to be able to go and say, hey, Sean, somebody has said that they didn't feel you're seeing that department enough. Well, now he knows if we hear that again, you've ignored what we've asked.
Exactly.
Right, but if we haven't asked, if we don't know that there's a hole to fill in the dike, then we've got to.
Right.
I'm going to also just add really quickly, I read this morning, which I thought was important to, not this conversation, but while I was thinking about this conversation, it was just in the Axios finish line, and I can forward it through staff too. The number one reasons Americans are quitting their jobs amid the Great Resignation is toxic company culture, according to a Flex Job survey. That outpaces reasons like compensation, bad management, and unhealthy work-life balance. And working in a positive environment means more to employees than other key factors. And I think that just ties into that survey, along with this kind of review process, is, to make sure that we are understanding, because we have had some, pretty big positions, go elsewhere. And so I think we need to be cognizant as a commission, because we do kind of work in a silo because of sunshine and because of public records. We can't even have these discussions offline individually. We have to do it right here in front of the public. So I just want to keep having that at our top of mind as we're thinking, because this is for the better of Lakeland. We want everybody to be successful who works in the city of Lakeland, and support them as much as possible. All right, other commissioner comments? Yes, Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. We got to make sure we give consideration to item number 10.
Yes.
Number 10.
I thought we were going to just do that on Monday. We can talk
Well,
about
I think
that.
it should be,
Yep.
this is what I think about what they're going to be getting into.
Yep.
Because I will not, this is my last rodeo, and I will not be the voting delegate, as I have been, because I'm, as president, I'll be doing my last little whatever at the conference. I would like to encourage.
10A.
Number 10.
Yes.
10A, voting delegate for the League of Cities. I'm so glad, because in my mind, I just put you in that spot, so I'm glad you're addressing this.
Well, I'm up there, in my position, I'm there, as you all know, but I'm there to facilitate, oversee, that kind of thing.
You get to vote anyway, don't you?
I get to vote anyway,
We need two
No, we
votes.
need another vote.
Didn't I do that last year?
I thought you did.
I did, yeah, I think
I
so.
thought you did last year. So I was making sure whoever
I am
we
going,
choose,
so.
we plan on going, the dates and how much,
Okay.
what dates are, and that kind of thing.
Commissioner McLeod, are you going?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
I'm a maybe.
But we know that Commissioner Madden's going for sure.
Okay, I just want to make sure,
Thank you.
you remember
you.
the dates.
Thanks for bringing that back up.
Time frame, that kind of thing.
If he leaves, we really need a little notebook.
Yeah, we need you to put together
You have definitely done
Yes. the lion's share
yes,
of our representation. And thank you for doing that so well.
yes, thank you.
Our little stuff now, are we going to do utility next? Or
No, we're going to do our little stuff
Can I
now.
just tie into what he just said real
Yes.
quickly? We just received your, unfortunately, official resignation letter, which is effective November 7th. So under our change to the charter, his successor, the successor to fill that vacancy as of November 7th, needs to be selected by majority vote of the city commission. It's no longer a special election.
Thank God.
So just start thinking about how we want to go about that. There's, it's a little bit open as to how you go about that. You can either, if you all have consensus on the perfect person to fill that vacancy, you can just do that directly. We could advertise it. I know Kelly's put together some information on.
It should be from the Northwest.
Well, there's the change to the charter requires that if it's a district commissioner, the person filling the vacancy has to be from that district. They cannot be term limited out, and they have to otherwise meet the qualifications to be a city commissioner. But as far as selecting that person, it's just by majority vote of the city commission. So you can either select someone directly if you have a perfect candidate, and there's a consensus on that, or you can kind of advertise it in some form or fashion.
Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you. When we appointed Commissioner Selvage, Kelly, did you receive names? Were people able to submit? Did I remember that correctly?
They asked for applicants to apply.
Yeah.
They sent in a resume.
Right.
Tampa has had vacancies recently, so they've gone through the process. So I kind of looked at theirs, and they've lined up what they needed from all the applicants. So I looked at what we require for qualifying and identified the documents that are required to
prove that they fill all the requirements to serve, live in the district, registered voter, not convicted of a felon, all that kind of stuff. So I have a list that I've given to Palmer of the documents that they would want to submit, and it's up to you to decide if you want to accept applications and when, and what you want the deadline to be, and you don't have to decide that today.
No.
Just letting you know. We're
So we all need to be
preparing.
thinking about that, and it's coming soon, and
But the vacancy will occur on November 7th.
so we should do this preemptively September, and by the latest, know by mid-October who we want to place in that position so they could start on the 7th.
Right. I mean,
That would be their start date,
with
swearing
the
in date.
state House of Representatives, you begin your service the next day, right after the election. It's not like January with a lot of other offices. So there's going to be a vacancy in that seat November 8th.
So you would serve that first Monday of November, the 6th would be your last commission meeting. So then the third Monday would be the 20th. November 20th?
Yes, 7th, 6th.
So we would need somebody in place by November 20th, and preferably November 7th, so
Right.
they could sit with staff and kind of learn protocols and different things before they got sworn in.
November
on
7th
the-
is the first Monday.
That's what I'm saying.
But you're there the
You're
first.
there.
No, his resignation is effective November 7th, so I take that to be 12:01 a.m.
Oh, so then we need to have this done by
The end of
mid-October.
mid-October, so somebody could come and listen.
That's what I
to
mean,
figure out and get
or
that
even
figured
beginning of
November 7th is the
October.
first Monday, I'm not there.
So maybe the 1st of October.
So when would we post the, for applications?
Then applications, because we have to vote on those and discuss them, so then you'd want to discuss and vote in September. Yeah? So then applications would probably need to be due in mid-August.
And is that what we want to do? Is we want to put
I'm just
application?
throwing that out. I'm just thinking in a calendar standpoint of having somebody who has exposure and who can sit in on a couple meetings before they get sworn in, because we get that, you didn't. But the rest of us that got elected, and I got elected in a special, but I still was, well, no, I started the next week, but I started coming to meetings. I would watch meetings beforehand. So you and I didn't get that. But everybody else, if you get elected in November and you get sworn in the first meeting of January, you have November and over Christmas really to meet with staff, directors and visit and kind of meet with the city attorney and understand process, which is what I highly recommend as an onboarding for a commissioner.
Yeah.
Well, then what's the temporary seat? The length? When's the actual election?
It's basically shortening your term by a year, so there'd be an election following November. So November the vacancy is November 7th, 22.
November
23, to be a one-year term.
November's election.
So it'd be a
So
one-year
it could be a
term.
one-year term that we're appointing somebody, so that's why we need to let them get as acclimated as possible, make sure we have an application process. This is Sarah Roberts McCarley talking, this is not the will of the commission.
Don't you think it loud, that's all.
Thank you, I'm thinking out loud, yes, Commissioner Music.
I was not sure, you had made a couple lists of things that they couldn't do. Was one of them that they have already?
Can't be term limited.
Okay, that was what I didn't hear. So they can serve, but they could not have term limited out.
Right,
Okay.
and they have to, if it's a district commissioner, that's the vacant
He has to
seat.
be in that,
The
or he or
successor
she,
has
sorry.
to reside in that district as well for a year.
Okay.
Right.
I think we wanted to kind of have somebody that maybe wasn't going to run.
Would not want to run, yeah.
Well, no, that's the will of a couple commissioners, I don't think that's the whole will, because that's not my will.
That was,
Because I hate to appoint somebody that's, here's the place, you're just, here, you're going to get the seat next time.
Well, yeah, they have the power of the incumbency for sure.
But you do, but,
Yes, I don't want to inflict that on anyone,
Right.
ever. Yeah.
I do think we need to make sure we get applications available in time, because there are some people who are interested.
Yes.
They're inquiring, they're calling the
I
office.
think there are
That's
people who are
They're
interested.
watching these meetings for it to show
There
up
are
on the
people
agenda.
inquiring.
Good.
Yes.
Okay, so we decided it's not in our charter that they would be precluded from running.
That the charter doesn't say.
The charter does never.
When we made that last
That's not a charter
update.
issue. That was a will of the commission at the time.
So is it an ordinance?
No,
No.
that was
Nothing
just,
precludes
Nothing.
successor,
It was just
still
something we
vacancy
should
to run.
discuss among us. That's all.
I could ask that question, and whatever their answer, you could say yes or no to that person who could do their answer if you want.
And they could do it, yeah, like we had that on
Part of our
something.
discussion, but that is not going to be a part of the decision. Like
That's
it's
at your discretion.
That's at our discretion. It was
It may
part of our decision
individually,
last
but
time.
I think there's a split amongst
There
us.
is a split,
Yeah.
yeah, there is.
There was.
There's at least one dissenter on that. Because I don't think it's necessarily tipping the scales for, I mean, you still had to run and win, right?
I did,
Yeah.
yeah.
It was easy though, right?
That's what I'm saying. I think he's our poster child that it's not necessarily easy. Anyway, just my personal opinion. I get a little fired up about that. Okay, so what we need to do is have that at the forefront of our mind. So probably in July, we need to discuss, or in the second meeting when the mayor is here, or even on Monday, we need to discuss a date for application acceptance and build out a calendar.
A deadline, you mean?
Yeah, a deadline.
But people are asking.
And I think it needs to be an like whatever it is that we have to do to be qualified, that should be deemed the application, yes? I'm asking my commissioner, sorry.
I would think so.
Yeah.
Why would it not be?
Right, it should be the application, right? Kelly's.
That's what you were alluding to, Kelly, right?
That is, but I don't have a vote in the thing.
Yeah.
I have a
No, but
preference, but I don't have a vote.
yeah, but from a staff perspective, you
Yeah, I
would
think they
prefer
should
to have an
submit the
application.
paperwork. There's that candidate's oath, that
Right.
they take the oath, that they
Right.
meet all the requirements. I think that's
Yeah.
From the beginning, yeah.
Yeah.
And you all took that
Yes.
as part of your qualifying, that week of
Exactly.
qualifying.
Then I think that's
So
what
the only
we
difference
require.
would be is they're not bringing a check.
Right.
They're just bringing all the other paperwork.
Right,
Okay.
yeah.
That's part of the process.
That was how I anticipated approaching.
I think that's great.
I concur.
Thumbs up on that?
Yes.
Okay.
We have a hand.
Hi, Kevin.
Just ask that you please consider giving us a month to promote and get the word out.
Sure.
So if you'd work backwards, just give us a month to really push it to get,
Especially with this, if we're doing in August, then this summer, I feel like
yeah,
people
to
are
get
so.
additional applicants.
Yeah. I mean, even 6 weeks, I think.
I won't be sitting next to you.
I think it's imperative that we let them know also that they're gonna have to enter financial disclosure. Some people that might be an issue for.
Well, I'll let
You
them
wanna
know.
make sure they know that in
Oh,
advance.
shit, yeah.
I'll let them know.
Kelly's got that, man.
I'll let them know up front as soon as they reach out what's required.
Well, and I mean, we could potentially even decide Monday in our, well, Monday's gonna be probably a longer meeting, but maybe at our next agenda study, set the timeline, application dates, and then that gives you, Kevin, time to do it. So that'll be the second meeting in June, second agenda study in June. Don't you think?
I do, I think that's.
Yeah.
And Kelly, if you could put together a calendar that would be beneficial to you based on our comments just now,
Well, and I'll include Kevin's
and
month.
include Kevin's month in there, yeah, and then we can look at that.
At the red, white, and kaboom, you can.
Hear ye.
Announce it to all
Just like
the
July
people
4th.
gathered in the city.
We'll nail it on the front door of commission.
Or like the Hunger Games.
We get rid of walking.
Well, I'm encouraged that
Who's going
people
to
are
pay
already
tribute?
calling. I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
That people are interested in joining us. And we're sad to see you go, of course, but
Hear you, we get rid of walking.
Nobody said that.
nobody said that. All right, anything else? Do you want to, yes, sir?
Yes, first of all, I want to apologize to my fellow real estate members of being tardy today. I have some out-of-state guests, and we had logistics issues today, but there again, and I'll get with Palmer, I have some issues with the real estate thing. I don't know how it went today, but, I didn't know if we had a RFP for that property. I didn't even know it was for sale and stuff like that. There again, to give you an example, I sold a property in September, which the appraisal was done for the highest price it had got in that neighborhood. And one right next to me just sold for almost 50% more. And so I think, that appraisal was done in September. I think it's grossly underpriced. And there's some alternative uses there that could even get more money for that. But there again, I understand it's for the county and their use, but I'll bring that up on Monday.
Anything else? No, okay.
So I know that the Paul Diggs is Saturday and the park opening. Have we heard anything more about the tropical storm? Like we're feeling like it is rain or shine, those happen.
Looking at EOC, Emily. Yep, so I will touch base, so I have been communicating with our fire department and Ellie just with storm preparations, but I'll see about this weekend's events and I'll make sure to get a message out before then today.
It's gonna stay south of us, we're gonna be fine.
Okay.
I got roofs I gotta do, it's gonna stay south.
Anything else? All right, we're adjourned. Y'all are awesome. Thank you.
Facility Committee at 11.
Okay. Is it in here?
Is it?